Okay. Good evening. My name is Joanne Muir. I'm with the Stillwater League of Women Voters, and we're hosting this mayoral forum for Mark Trotter and Will Joyce. And I have the format. I want to welcome them both to this and agreeing to do this. And they did the coin toss, and Will won, so he'll go first in opening statements, and then he'll go first in closing statements, Mark Trotter. And they have 2 minutes for opening and closing statements and 90 seconds to respond to questions. And Susan Rackley and Ann Cougar are the timers, and they will hold up the paddles when it's 1 minute, 30 seconds, 15 seconds, and stop. Okay. Karen Melcher and Jan Largent are going around and they're handing out cards. Just raise your hands and someone will pick up a card if you have a question written down on it. And no personal attacks, please. And they'll also screen the questions, Karen and Jan will. And Deanna Homer is monitoring the phone. And this will be broadcast on AT&T channel, Uverse channel 99 and Suddenlink channel 14 every night at 9 p.m. until February 8th, 2022, which is the election day. And you can vote early on the third and fourth Thursday and Friday before the election. So I welcome you all here. And
will you repeat those channels?
Pardon me?
Will you repeat those channels?
Channels, yes. AT&T Uverse channel 99, Suddenlink channel 14. Did you get them? Okay. And I ask everyone to turn off your cell phones, please. Okay, and I guess we can get started. So, Will, you read opening statement.
All right.
Okay.
Well, I want to start by saying thank you to League of Women Voters for putting this forum on and for having us out here tonight. Appreciate the opportunity to come in and speak with you all and to address the community in this way. My name is Will Joyce. I'm the mayor in Stillwater. I've been the mayor for the last 4 years. For 2 years before that, I was a member of the city council, so I've spent 6 years in this room helping make decisions for our community. It's been an honor and a privilege to do so. I am a native of Stillwater, grew up here, went to Stillwater High School in Oklahoma State, moved away for 10 years to go to law school in St. Louis, and came back in 2011. I think the question I've gotten most over the last couple of months is, why would I want to do this again? It's been a challenging time for all of us here over the last couple of years. But you know, the answer to that question is fairly simple. I love Stillwater. I love this community. My wife and I chose to come back here in 2011 with our 4 children because we wanted to raise them here. We wanted to send them to school here. And we wanted this to be the community that our family was a part of. So with that in mind, and with the work that I've done and been part of here on the city council for the last 6 years, there are wonderful things happening in Stillwater right now. There's a ton of growth, development. The economy is doing well in Stillwater, and I want to be a part of continuing that momentum and growth and movement forward. And so, you know, that was what really weighed on my mind in terms of deciding to run for re-election. And so I'm excited to have the opportunity to continue to do this for 4 more years. I hope that you will go vote on February 8th and that you will vote for me, Will Joyce, to be reelected as the Stillwater mayor.
Thank you. Mark.
Hello, my name is Mark Trotter, and I'm a lighting designer as my line of work. And so what that means is I quite literally illuminate things for a living, as I said earlier. So really, all that entails is anytime there's a concert venue, an outdoor venue, a theater, basically I help figure out how to best illuminate the stage, how to bring things to light, and particularly how to follow the vision that's been cast to me. Now that said, today I'm asking you to allow me to bring that skill to our city government. The reality is I want to bring light to the subject. I want to shed light on things. The reality is anytime ambiguity is allowed to stay and make its home, we don't have the truth, right? Anytime ambiguity exists near our government, well, there's lost clarity. And I just want to bring more clarity. So really, with that in mind, there's been things that have been brought to my attention and certain patterns I've noticed that have lacked clarity, that have lacked just clear answers, and I don't think they should. And so particularly something that's been brought up to me many times is Mr. Joyce has sat on the Wondertorium board, and he also sits on the council. And I'm curious, what exactly happened to the Wondertorium? I don't know. I don't have an answer for that. I'm lost on some of those details, and really, we all want more information on these things. So what exactly happened?
Okay, all right. Have a first question, ask you. Critical infrastructure. What are plans for future improvement and to prevent cyber attacks to critical infrastructure?
That's an excellent question. When you first started with critical infrastructure, I thought we were going to talk about streets, but in the reference to cyber attacks and computer infrastructure in town, that is an excellent question. We've had many issues around the country with cyber attacks and with information security. I've spoken to Norman Winnickel, our city manager, and to our IT staff here in the city about that issue. I actually work for an IT consulting company, so it's an issue that I've dealt with a little bit in my day job. And I'm very, I think, confident in our local staff and the work that they've done to secure and harden our IT infrastructure here at the city. We've invested a lot in fiber optic connections around the city to make sure we have secure connections between all of our city facilities. Our electric utility and our water utilities are hardwired now through fiber optics and allows us to have greater security in that realm. So certainly something that we always want to continue to keep an eye on, but it has been a focus, and I am confident in what the city's doing right now.
Thank you. Mark?
Could you please
Repeat. Critical infrastructure. What are plans for future improvement and to prevent cyber attacks to critical infrastructure?
Well, to be perfectly honest, I would go speak with the department heads on that issue. I'd want to get clarity on what kind of issues we've ran into at this point, right, thus far. What's been happening? Where has this been an issue? And then really begin to find ways to better equip them to handle those things. The reality is cyber attacks are a major issue, right? Anytime they happen, there's data that could be stolen, and particularly in city government, that would be a major factor. That'd be a big issue. There's things we don't want people to get. There's things that we need to keep protected. So how can we make sure that that's kept true, right? That would be, the reality is I would just refer to the department heads and ask them what they feel like they need, and then, well, we would work together, the city council, and determine how best to approach that. Maintaining the city budget, not going over budget, but being wise, investing in long-term solutions with regards to that.
Okay, thank you. I'll ask you first. How do you plan to make sure you are aware of how the residents of Stillwater feel about zoning issues, taxes, etc.?
So sorry, thank you. One more time.
Okay. How do you plan to make sure you are aware of how the residents of Stillwater feel about zoning issues, taxes, etc.?
Oh, yeah. So it's my intention to actually visit with those residents individually, right? Anytime we have questions of what streets to close, what to keep open, I want to actually reach out to the houses around that area and find out what it is they think about it. I think that's the best way we can go about this. We can continue to be neighborly, right? That's one of the facets that makes Stillwater great, being neighborly. And really, we accomplish that by speaking to them individually, just reaching out to them, making a phone call. I got a call from a guy this morning making a statement to me that he was bothered by the bike trail that's being put on Husband Street. He didn't care for that, and he felt like he wasn't given a voice to speak into that issue. So I just want to make sure that we're doing everything we can to accommodate those matters.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great answer. I think we do need to make sure that we're having conversations with our community and our citizens. That's something in my time here on council and as mayor, I spend a lot of time doing. Several times a week, I'm on the phone or in a coffee shop or having a conversation with someone who's reached out about an issue. The Husband Street corridor is a good example of, we brought in a consultant to help us come up with some ideas for what might be done there. There was a focus group put together and an ongoing conversation with that project, and looking forward to continuing those conversations with folks. I've had several individual conversations about it myself, and there's no substitute for having those face-to-face conversations or those phone-to-phone or Zoom conversations as we've had a little bit over the last couple of years. And I enjoy doing that, and I spend a lot of time doing that. When folks reach out to me, my first reaction, especially if they reach out over email or over social media, is to say, hey, let's sit down and talk about it. Let's have a conversation. It's hard to do that typing on a keyboard. So that's absolutely something I'm committed to, and I'm committed to continue to do.
Okay. Thank you. Will, start with you with this question. Is the city of Stillwater financially sound? If yes, how can we keep it this way? Keep it there, and how? How can you improve it? If no.
Okay. Yes, I think the answer to that question is yes. The city of Stillwater is financially sound. We're in a very good financial position. A lot of that's due to our city staff, City Manager McNichol, our finance staff, Melissa Reams, and her team do an excellent job. We've actually, they've won 35 years in a row, something like that, the Municipal Accounting Award of Excellence. They do an excellent job preparing our books. Stillwater's books are audited every year per state law, and all of those come back clean. So we're very proud of the financial work that the city does. From a financial position, we have adequate reserves. The city for many years has planned ahead very well to have reserves in place for those rainy days that might come up. In fact, last year with our ice storm that caused significant expense to our generation and electric utilities, we were actually, instead of what OG&E did or ONG did, where they're making everybody pay money for the next 25 years, the city was actually able to take half of that additional expense out of reserves that we had in place. I think we are in a good financial position. We need continued good management. We need continued good decisions about spending, and I'm committed to do that.
Okay. Mark?
As he said, I think we actually are currently financially sound. Every report indicates that, and I think that's a good thing. How long that will last, it's hard to say. We continually have more taxes put on the docket. We're continually asked for more. And the reality is that affects the citizens' personal accounts directly. And I think we need to reconsider that approach. The truth of the matter is, when my accounts aren't where I want them to be, I have to stop spending. I don't ask people for more money. I think it's important that we take that same approach to our city government and, just treat it that same way. We shouldn't keep asking for more money. The reality is this year inflation is through the roof. So why are we asking for more? Why don't we try and continue to find better ways to manage it better, what's already been given to us by the citizens? It is our money. And so I think it's important to find that savings so that we don't have to keep asking for more. That's really the heart of the issue.
Thank you. What plans or goals do you have for attracting a diverse pool of employees to Stillwater? Or employers, I think, to Stillwater.
Well, for one, I think we incentivize them to come here by not raising rates, right? Particularly taxes. We incentivize business when we keep the cost of entry lower. The reality is using things like the TIF to pay for that, it's rerouting needed funds from other services. I don't think that's how we ought to be doing this. I think we need to empower employers and people to move into our city through free market incentives, lowering their taxes, keeping it off, cutting through unnecessary regulatory red tape, things of that nature. I think that's really the common sense way to approach this. It's pretty simple.
Okay, thank you. Mayor.
I wish it were that simple. It's a complicated issue, attracting new employers and attracting new folks to our community. I would say, first of all, that there aren't any business taxes in the city of Stillwater for us to cut. Second of all, I'd say that when we do talk to employers, and we have, through our partnership with the Chamber of Commerce, we do a lot of business recruitment. I go to a lot of those meetings with new folks who are looking at Stillwater as a possible place to be. And I'll tell you, the thing that comes up most when it comes to employers and businesses looking to relocate here are, what is there to do? What is the infrastructure like? Do you have good water and electric facilities for us? Stillwater passes those tests with flying colors. Our electric utilities and water utilities are always at the very top of the list when it comes to employers looking at relocating here. But they do worry about, where are we going to go? Where are we going to go eat? Where are my employees going to shop? Are my employees going to want to live in this community? And those are the issues we deal with more often than anything. I don't think we've ever dealt with somebody who felt expenses or taxes were too high here in the city of Stillwater. But they do look at, what else are we doing to improve entertainment options, quality of life options, and those are the things I think we need to invest in so that we can attract more of those diverse employers.
Thank you. Mayor Joyce, I have a question is specifically for you. What happened to Wondertorium, to the Wondertorium?
Mark asked that earlier, and I didn't expect that to come up. I was on the Wondertorium board. I joined that board when we first came back in 2011 because we came back with 4 kids under 6, and they love the Wondertorium, and we spent a lot of time there. So I did join that board as one of my first kind of getting back involved in the city of Stillwater, and was on that board for 4 years or so. I left that board when I was elected to the city council for the first time in 2016, mainly because time commitment issues. I was very proud of the work the Wondertorium did. The big struggle for the Wondertorium from its very beginning was not attracting enough funding. Most children's museums like that start with a big 7-figure gift. The Wondertorium was started by local moms who wanted a place for their kids to play, and they worked really, really hard to try to find that money to support a museum that people could afford to go to. And unfortunately, they weren't able to find that support. And it's a tragedy for our community. It absolutely is. I wish it was still here. I wish we were able to find a funding mechanism that would have worked to keep them here. But they didn't want to charge what it would cost to actually run the museum, because that meant more people wouldn't be able to go. And so unfortunately, financially, it just didn't work out. I'm as sad about it as anybody. And I'm proud of the work that I did as part of the Wondertorium board.
Thank you. You don't need to answer that.
I would love to ask the question of Mark, what is the impetus of that question?
Well,
Okay.
The reality is we had a Wondertorium, and we don't. And honestly, I'm just as curious as the other citizens are about that.
It's an interesting question because at any point, you can ask me that question. What is it about bringing it up in this conversation that you feel is important?
Well, it was brought to me within the past few days, specifically.
Well, I'm happy to answer it. Anybody has questions about the Wondertorium, or if you'd like to sit down and talk about it more, I'd love to talk about it. I'd love to see us get another children's museum back here in Stillwater. And I think that's something the city of Stillwater and the community of Stillwater should absolutely be willing and raring to invest in to bring those kinds of amenities, because that's exactly what I was talking about when I talked about businesses and what they look for. When they want to move employees and employees' families here, things like the Wondertorium are what they look for. And so we need that back, and we need to be willing as a community to invest in those types of opportunities.
Thank you. We'll start with you, Mark. 2 tax measures are on the ballot for February 8th. Are you in favor of these tax increases? And if not, what specific core services would you cut or discontinue as a cost-saving measure?
So, I don't support the visitor tax. Here's why. The only fair tax is a flat sales tax. The reason for that is it's the only tax that's non-discriminatory in any way to anybody. It's really that simple. Any other taxes target certain groups. Particularly the visitor tax will target our Airbnb services and our hotels in town. And the reality is they say it won't hit our citizens, but what about the times when they're displaced from their homes and they have to rent a hotel or something? We're not thinking about that. What about attracting new businesses or new citizens to our city? And maybe they're trying the place out, but they just got nailed with a higher visitor tax. What then? It's welcoming them with this idea of, oh, thanks for coming. Here, you got to pay us more money, though. I just don't understand that mindset and that approach. And then the transportation tax, that is a sales tax, so I don't have a moral issue with that, other than this year. It's poorly timed, right? It's a poorly timed tax. Everybody's prices are going up. Things are going up. Why are we offering that idea up now? Why aren't we trying to find more ways to manage what we already have? I'm not necessarily, I don't know where the money is. I want to find it. I want to find clarity in those areas.
Thank you. Mayor.
Well, I support both the increase in the visitors tax and the transportation sales tax. I will say that I don't think sales tax is particularly fair. It's a regressive tax. If you make $10,000 and you go to buy 2 gallons of milk, you're paying a much bigger percentage of your income than someone who makes $100,000 who's buying those same 2 gallons of milk. So it's not particularly, I wouldn't say fair necessarily, although it is fair in the sense that everybody who uses our infrastructure in the community of Stillwater is normally going to be paying sales tax. So it doesn't put that burden on specific segments of the population instead of others. We need transportation funding. We have $75 to $80 million of transportation projects that need to be funded. That's not possible out of the budget. I don't care how much you cut out of the budget. You're going to have to fire police officers and get rid of fire trucks if you want to cut that much money out of our budget to fund roads. The visitors tax is being raised in line with areas around us. It funds very important services that bring visitors to our community. The increase in the visitors tax will also fund visitor infrastructure so that people have those things to come out of. In fact, something like the Wondertorium could be funded out of this increase because it does bring visitors in. It brought visitors in from all over our state. So I think these are well-timed, good investments for our community, and I hope that you will vote for them as well as voting for me on February 8th.
Okay. This question will start with you, Mayor. What are your thoughts about the 2 bond proposals for this year, animal shelter and new fire station?
Yeah, so there's only going to be 1 bond proposal on the ballot this year. We discussed that at City Council this last week. I think both of those projects are very important. The fire station has been needed for 10, 15 years. We've been trying to pass a bond to fund a new fire station. Fire Station 2 on campus is just not adequate for the needs of our community anymore. So that bond, and the reason I spoke in favor of just putting that bond on the ballot for April is that I think our community really needs to be able to focus on that as a huge priority for our community. Moving that fire station over on Western Road will lower our property insurance rates in this community, and it's just really important. So we just put that one on the ballot for now. The animal shelter needs to be replaced. It really is in poor shape. We serve tons and tons of animals through that facility all the time. I think earlier, first month of the year, they'd already had 500 animals through the animal shelter. So it needs to be replaced as well. And I will support putting that bond on at a later date. But I really, really want our community to focus on passing the fire station bond, which will be on the ballot in April.
Mark?
Well, it goes back to the only fair tax is a flat sales tax, and bond issues are usually paid for through property taxes. On that note, I can't support that. It's just not right. I think we need to find other ways to fund that. It's really that simple. It obviously, sometimes you need to invest more, but if you're going to do it, I think you need to find other ways to make it happen. You approach it like any normal human being does. Where do I need to make some cuts? Where do I need to save?
Okay, Mark, we'll start with you. How would you work to improve and sustain education in Stillwater Public Schools? How to address fly dumping and littering in our city? How would you address? I don't know what fly dumping is. Littering.
So can you rearrange the first half of that?
How would you work to improve and sustain education in Stillwater's public schools? And how would you address fly dumping and littering in our city? And I don't know what fly dumping is.
Okay.
Does it?
I'm not sure. I know. I don't know what fly dumping is.
I think I read that. Maybe I was talking about like spraying our air and then dumping chemicals in the grass to kill weeds. That's
Okay.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Fly dumping is basically littering, dumping in the middle of the night.
Oh. Okay.
Okay.
Interesting. Wow. Well, I didn't know that was an issue. But it's the same thing. You visit with your departments, you ask some questions, right? If citizens say there's a problem area, you visit with them about it. You find out, you kind of find ways to incorporate them into solving the problem. Bring the community on board. Then it saves cost. As far as helping our public education, for me, the obvious choice is to not utilize TIF funding. The reality is TIF funding comes from our property taxes. And so for the areas that it covers, it comes from the school's funding. So if we redirect the TIF property taxes to our city issues and trying to pay our favorite businesses to come in, we're taking funding from the schools. At least that's my understanding of it. And so that would be one way as a mayor that I could help the schools.
Thank you. This question. Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I'll address that one as well. Starting with education, first off, I know you indicated, Mark, that you maybe don't have a great understanding of TIF funding, but it certainly doesn't take any funding away from the schools. In fact, the downtown TIF that we passed 4 years ago provides additional funding to the schools that doesn't count against their state funding formula. So it provides additional funding to our school district to be able to spend on things they need. The other ways is the city can support education, because the city and the school district are entirely separate legal entities, but we do have a very strong working relationship. So things like school zones and working with school facilities and making sure that we have a good relationship there so that they can get things done efficiently is really important. I've got a good relationship with a lot of school board members, and I think that's really the best answer to that question is building strong relationships between the city and the school officials, and that's been something we focused on both with the public schools and with the university. I think we need to continue doing that so that we have those conversations regularly. In terms of dumping and trash, those are really difficult problems because people do it in the middle of the night. You got to find the sites that are popular, and we send out code enforcement officers to try to figure out, if we can, ways to stop those things. But I think part of it is just public education and talking to people more about those problems and highlighting those problems. Maybe it's something we could spend some PR resources on, highlighting issues where we're seeing that. But it's a difficult one.
Thank you. Mark, this is for you. What other funding vehicles would you enact outside of a bond or tax increase?
Well, I'm going to catch that and then I'll wrap back to the previous one.
Okay.
The main funding vehicle that I'm going to try and employ is saving. Okay. Just like any normal human being, I think we need to try and save. Save to invest, right? You don't try and invest and then put it on your children, right? You don't want to spend that money and then take it out of your children's pockets. You want to spend it out of what you have now. You want to spend it out of what's already available. As far as the TIF thing, the thing that has me confused about that is I have heard from every county official I've spoke with that what you just said was specifically not true. And so I don't know what to believe about that. That's what I've been told.
In terms of the I'm sorry, could you repeat the question? Or was that just for
Yes.
him?
It was for him, but
Oh.
if you want to
I'll,
address
yeah,
it.
I'd love to
Okay.
respond if I can.
What other funding vehicles would you enact outside of a bond or tax increase?
Yeah, so I just would make the point that certainly every household and people with jobs go, they work on their budget, try to control their spending, try to make sure we're not spending more than what we're making. But another thing that we all do is we go to our boss every year and ask for a raise. And we work on our job skills so that we can go find maybe employment that might pay us a little bit more to cover the expenses that we have. We do, all of us at some point need to work on trying to improve our income stream. The city can always work more on budgets. I think, I've been here for 6 years working on the city council. And I know I think our city employees have had one raise in that time period. I think our city departments have cut tons of their budget money, certainly recently. But I would love to hear where specifically in our city budgets, because they're all online, they're all very transparent. Anybody can go comb through every dollar we spend. I would love to see where we think the fat is in that city budget and what services that are needed to be cut so that we could afford to spend more on other things. In terms of TIFs, my information is firsthand, and I would love to sit down with you and walk through the documents and show you exactly how it works. And I'd sit down with county officials as well, but I think it's an important topic that we should all learn more about.
Mayor, are all the police cars in Stillwater equipped with necessary laptops? If not, what is being done to address this issue? Also, body cameras. As the city grows, are the needs to provide additional officers being addressed now?
Yeah, those are excellent questions. Public safety is a huge priority. We did just recently vote to fund a body-worn camera initiative that our police department brought to the council and said this was something they'd like for them to be able to do. And so we are spending several $100,000s on body cameras, computer equipment, so that we do have that camera system available. In terms of every car being equipped with necessary laptops, I can't say for sure. I think they are. I know that we work very closely with Chief Watts and with the police department to make sure that we are adequately funding our police department. I think that is a tremendous necessity. I think good policing happens in Stillwater because we have a very professional, a very well-trained, and a very equipped police force. That's a necessary thing for our community to have. The city of Stillwater requires additional training above and beyond state requirements by like twice above state requirements, which I think is incredibly important. And as the mayor, I am committed to making sure the police have the resources they need to serve our city well.
Thank you. Do you want to address that or not? Okay.
I mean, I have no idea if the police have the proper laptops in their
Okay.
cars. I would assume the same. I
Okay.
think that was a great answer.
Okay. All right, will you, and we'll start with, will you enforce a mask mandate? And would you mandate COVID-19 vaccines?
Not a chance. There is no scenario I would consider that. Period.
Okay.
As I've said, we're a nation of kings. No king can tell another king what they can or cannot do with their property, their body, or their kingdom. It's that simple. As Thomas Jefferson stated, I prefer a dangerous freedom to a peaceful slavery. That's my entire perspective on how government ought to handle our rights and our liberties. That was the intent. That's how it's been from the beginning of the earth till now. Anytime a government steps outside of that framework, they are no longer behaving as your public servant, and that can't be allowed. And so I can't stand for that. And so that also goes for the vaccine mandates. I mean, even more so. That's in your body. What it does, that's not really my issue. That's not my concern. Okay? But those people need to feel secure in their choice to do what they need to do for themselves. That's my position.
Okay.
I would,
Wait, let me make a, please hold your applause. Okay, thank you.
I did in fact vote for a mask mandate in the city of Stillwater, and I felt like that was the right decision. If the circumstances warranted for us to take action based on public health advice by our local and state officials, I will do what we need to do to protect the health of our citizens. I don't think this is a controversial topic outside of the realm of COVID-19. I would surmise from Mr. Trotter's answer that he's also not going to enforce our seatbelt laws or our zoning codes or any of the other laws that the city of Stillwater passes that do tell you what you can and can't do in certain parts of your own property and in your car and all those sorts of things. I would also say that while he says we're a nation of kings, I would say that the United States is a nation of laws, and they're laws made democratically under the Constitution that we all hold so dear. Laws made constitutionally in this country are enforceable by the governments that make them, and that's how we exist peaceably together, is that we are a nation of laws, that we are under the rule of law, and any city government or state government is required and has the authority to make laws when needed to help the betterment of their society. And that's it's interesting to me to think that we would go around saying every person is their own king and we can't tell each other what to do. That's no way to run a society. But it is what it is.
Thank you. We'll start with you, Mayor Joyce. What are some ways, and we kind of touched on this in a previous question, what are some ways we can discourage pollution of air chemical spraying by airplanes and water chemical management of weeds like glyphosate? Are these pollution concerns being addressed?
So pollution concerns at that level are really more a state and a national concern. We don't have a local environmental code. I suppose that's something we could look into. We certainly have codes around environmental issues when people are doing construction. We've got to make sure that they don't allow certain runoff into our storm sewers and into our waterways. Those laws are all promulgated at the state level or at the national level, and our city employees work really hard because we do have to check. One of the things we talk about is if you mow your lawn in the summer, don't leave your grass clippings out in the street, because when those chemicals that people may use on their lawns run into the waterways. And so there's some public education certainly to be done on some of those things. But environmental law for the most part is really a state and a federal issue. I think the city will continue to enforce that where we're required to do so,
Okay.
and certainly focus on the things that we can control.
Okay. What was let's see, what are some ways we can discourage pollution of air chemical spraying by airplanes and water chemical management of weeds like glyphosate? Are these pollution concerns being addressed?
Well, as a beekeeper, that is something I've thought about, specifically just the pesticides that are used on the flowers, things like that, right? So we have to keep our pollinators. As far as what the planes put out, I'm not sure. I haven't studied that. So first I'd have to go forth and learn about that. But I think, generally speaking, the U.S. has done a pretty good job of passing laws and regulations that make sure that we don't spray pesticides on our plants and things that would be harmful to pollinators because they don't ingest the pesticide. The reality is most of the pesticides that are sprayed usually are the kind that have to be ingested to be dangerous, and so they're only toxic in that first 24-hour period, if I remember correctly. It's been a hot minute. But so if someone's able to bring me some compelling evidence of that, I mean, obviously I'd be willing to look into that and make those considerations.
Okay, thank you. What was the outcome of spending $50,000 to incentivize people to get a COVID vaccine? Was that a wise use of COVID funding?
Me?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, you go for it.
I think, I don't think so. The reality is there were pandemic options outside of that. There were pandemic funding options that we could choose besides putting it to a raffle, besides, I mean, for lack of better words, bribing our citizens to take something that maybe they may or may not have studied well enough. I don't know. But it just seems like we could have spent it on some of those infrastructure items that were earmarked by the federal government for those expenditures, for those uses. I think we should have considered some of those.
Thank you. Mayor?
I think the COVID incentive program, the vaccination incentive program, was a excellent use of the funding we had available. We have a lot of additional COVID funding available. I'm not sure what infrastructure needs that Mark's addressing. The fact of the matter is that the COVID vaccine is very effective at keeping people out of the hospital and keeping people from getting very sick. And the biggest problem throughout the pandemic when it comes to Stillwater locally is the burden that it's placed on our local medical center. The medical center has been full at multiple occasions. It's full right now. And that not only is it a problem because people need to seek treatment for COVID, it's a problem because people who are seeking treatment for things like renal failure and heart attacks and cancer treatment are not able to do so adequately in our facility because too many people are in the hospital with COVID. And so if we can keep 5, 6, 7 people out of the hospital because they got vaccinated, I think that's absolutely an incentive that we should and that we were happy to provide. The hospital actually provided some of their own funds for that as well. So I think it was a good use of funding, and I hope that people will continue to see the value in being vaccinated against COVID-19 to protect our medical center from the additional patients and the additional resource burden of this pandemic.
Thank you. All right, we'll start with you, Mayor Joyce. What is your opinion of Planned Parenthood, and would you allow it in Stillwater?
Wow. That's a new one. I don't have an opinion of Planned Parenthood. It's not something that I've ever had to use or interact with. I don't think the city has the power to keep a medical clinic like Planned Parenthood out. I know we don't have the power to regulate. I mean, we can't keep weed dispensaries out, even if we wanted to. So I don't think there's really much in the city's power when it comes to a specific type of medical clinic like Planned Parenthood. That's not an issue that really has ever come up in my 6 years on council, and so I'm not sure what we would do if a clinic like that was interested in being in Stillwater.
Thank you, Mark.
So this is an issue that I find deeply disturbing. I think one of the scourges on our nation is the passage of the Roe v. Wade. The reality is I'm interested in protecting people's individual liberties, all people, including those inside the womb. That child's right to be able to depend on their mother and their father for security of their life and security of their liberty, that supersedes that parent's right to a life of convenience. It's really that simple. I think we made a mistake when we allowed that in. It's not even a real law. It's just an opinion. So yeah, I would stop Planned Parenthood from coming in really in any way I possibly could.
Mark, we'll start with you with this one. As mayor, you will be a member of the Stillwater Medical Board. Without further public health measures, mass vaccines, etc., how will you address the overflow to our hospital and the strain on our healthcare infrastructure?
So I have heard from many people who work inside the hospitals that what they are witnessing is not what's being told to us. So as a member on the board, well, I'll be closer to that information. I'll be able to verify some of that and get better clarity on it. But the way I see it, I'm not convinced that I've been given the full picture. But as a member of that board, I think I'd get a clearer picture on it. So I'd weigh those options out. But at the end of the day, I'm here to protect your individual rights and your individual liberties. That is the primary object of government, period.
Mayor.
Well, I am a member of the Medical Center Board because I'm the mayor. And again, I have firsthand knowledge, and I think there's a lot of people who aren't members of that board who have firsthand knowledge of what's going on at Stillwater Medical Center. I think it's unfortunate that many of Mr. Trotter's answers are, well, I don't really know, but I've been told. This is not a huge community. There are a lot of opportunities for all of us to be engaged and to understand what's happening in our communities. And I think if I was somebody who wanted to be engaged on the city council or be the mayor, I would have taken an opportunity before this to actually learn some of those direct firsthand, to gain some firsthand knowledge of some of these issues. I was at the hospital on December 24th of 2000, and it was a war zone. It absolutely was. They had ICUs set up in hallways, and it has been. We've had our boardroom turned into overflow from the ER. There's no spin happening in this setting, and I think that's clear to anybody who's taken the time to really get engaged and talk to folks. And it does disturb me the idea that someone who would want to be engaged at this level hasn't taken the time to really understand the situation at a deeper level.
Thank you. How will you balance, we'll start with Mark, how will you balance the desires of special interest groups within our community with the responsibility to all citizens?
Well, I would start by going back to our nation's roots and remembering things like the Ninth Amendment that says the enumeration of certain rights shall not be construed to deny or disparage others retained by the people. The enumeration of certain rights shall not be construed to deny or disparage others retained by the people. Okay, so really, when it comes to the time I've spent studying things, I've spent a lot more time focused on the principles of protecting your individual rights and your individual liberties, looking back at our nation's history, figuring out why this has worked so well over the past few centuries. It's worked excellently. We're killing it. That's just the fact of the matter. As far as special interest groups and whatnot, I'm really here to serve all of the citizens of Stillwater, okay? Everybody has special interests of their own. I want to hear all of the perspectives. And so anytime I'm presented with information, I really want to view all of the data, eyes wide open, and just see what they have to say about it, and then hear the opposing viewpoints. Make sure that I consider their rights, but also consider the information. So I want to make sure I walk in eyes wide open, starting with the right principles, so then when I come across the information, I can discern what to do with it correctly.
Okay. All right, we'll start with you.
Well, in my 6 years on council, I'm not sure I've ever dealt with somebody who I would have defined as a special interest group. Like Mark said, I think you're right. Everybody has a special interest, right? And there are certainly groups of people around town who are more interested in in some things than others. Excuse me. I guess maybe the most interesting special interest group we had was folks who wanted to be able to keep backyard chickens. And we went through that process. We had that conversation with them. They brought us model laws from other communities, and we talked to other folks in the community who might have an interest in that topic, and try to find some collaborative approach to make that happen. And we're able to pass a law that allowed backyard chickens. But yeah, I mean, it's a conversation, right? I mean, everybody's got an interest in something. I think it's a matter of building strong relationships, having those conversations directly with people as often as you can, and trying to find common ground. None of those decisions are easy. Pretty much every decision we make up here, every time I push one of these voting buttons, there's somebody on one side or the other of that issue who's not going to be happy. And it's difficult sometimes to weigh those things out, but it's a matter of conversation and relationship.
Okay, thank you. We'll start with you with this one, with Will. How would you mitigate the deferred maintenance issue that plagues our community?
Well, I guess I'll guess that deferred maintenance might be mostly directed towards roads, but I think we've also got some deferred maintenance problems in our drainage system, in some of our other infrastructure as well. And I think there's one easy solution, or I guess the easy answer to that is that we've got to invest more in maintenance. It's easy, I think, when it comes to roads especially, and I think this applies to all of these situations, but it's easiest to explain in roads. It's nice to go out and build a nice new road. People like a nice big smooth road. We replace a smaller road with something that's nice and pretty. Everybody likes it. Nobody's very happy. I get calls sometimes with, why are you guys putting another layer of asphalt on 12th Street when it was just rebuilt 4 years ago? Well, that's maintenance, right? Those are maintenance costs that say we have to be willing to invest smaller amounts of money in the maintenance of our assets so that we don't end up with tons of deferred maintenance in the future. And so, but sometimes we don't like to do that because we like to put that money into the big shiny new stuff. And so I think that's been a priority of the council, certainly in my time, our pavement management program especially, to make sure that we're taking care of the stuff we have now, even when it seems like, well, that one doesn't need to be as fixed as much as Monticello or some of these other streets in town that are in really bad shape. But if we don't do that maintenance now, we'll end up with bad streets in the future.
Thank you. Mark?
One more time.
You want me to repeat the question? Okay. How would you mitigate the deferred maintenance issue that plagues our community?
Okay. So we've got things like the wonderful new elementary school on 6th Street, and then the high rises that came up on OSU, things like that. Well, with the elementary school, it's my understanding that ODOT will be doing some work on that road in the near future. So perhaps it's a city code thing, I'm not sure. I would be curious why we decided to go ahead and build like a nice big sidewalk right there when the reality is we know it's going to get ripped out in a few years. It's things like that. Why don't we look a little further, right? And then maybe defer spending it on that thing if we know it's going to get covered later anyways by some other new revenue source. So that's one way we could, help cover our maintenance a little better. Obviously investing in longer term solutions, things like that.
Thank you.
Can I just make a really quick comment? My kids go to Westwood, and if they didn't have a sidewalk to walk on for the first 4 years they were there because we were waiting for ODOT to finish the road, that would be a problem for me. Sorry.
Okay, we'll start with you with this next question. What measures could be implemented to keep the intent of laws enacted years ago in place and apply them to the social environment that exists today?
Okay, could you
read that one more
Yes,
time.
it's kind of a loaded question, yeah. What measures could be implemented to keep the intent of laws enacted years ago in place and apply them to the social environment that exists today?
Wow. Well, I think it's important to stick with whatever the will of the people was, right? We need to make sure that whatever the intent was, we follow that. Now, we can always look for other options as things come our way, but at the end of the day, when there's a vote of the people, which I'm assuming we're talking about, that basically represents what they want. We need to follow the intent of how that was passed. And so it's really not my place to go against that or change it unless a new vote of the people passes. And so there's things like the visitor tax that's coming up. The reality is, regardless of how I feel about it, I'd want to make sure and ensure we do it according to the intent of the people that passed it. I'd want to make sure we do it according to the intent of the law. Now, that measure is being passed to, it's trying to move with the times, I think is what they're thinking. That is their intent. I don't necessarily agree with how they're going about it, but that is their intent. And that's one way we can keep up with the times, I suppose. Making sure that we follow the people's will. If they want to change it, we follow that.
Mayor?
Yeah, I think that's a good answer. I'm not really sure without some more context exactly what we're getting at with that question. But the law and being a policymaker and a lawmaker as a member of the city council is a complicated thing. There are ordinances on the books here in Stillwater that have been in place for decades. The visitor tax is a good example. That was first passed in 1985. And in fact, if you go back and read the original ordinance that was passed, a portion of that money was set aside for our centennial celebration in 1989. And so part of what we've cleaned up in the visitors tax ordinances, even just in my time here, which is well after 1989, was to make sure that it was clear that wasn't still a purpose of the visitors tax. Right, so there are times where we've got to go back and make sure that existing laws are still relevant and they still make sense under given scenarios. But again, it's a policymaking and a lawmaking objective to gather that information, gather as much information as you can about our community, and really, it's one thing to say, well, this is what people in Stillwater wanted 35 years ago. It's another thing to say, what is it that our community needs now? And for us to be willing and able to act on those needs, what's needed now, and for our city council to be willing and to do the work necessary to make sure our community is primed for the future.
Thank you. Okay. Mayor Joyce, we as citizens have the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. By protecting our individual rights, how will you protect the right to life during COVID?
How will I protect the right to life during COVID? I'm not sure how to approach that question. What I've tried to do in my role as mayor during COVID is to spend a lot of time with our public health officials locally. The Payne County Health Department, I've gotten to know Kelly Rader very well. I've spent a lot of time with Denise Weber at the hospital, with folks from our state health department. And I think our role as a community, our role as a city government, just like, if there was a restaurant in town that had an E. coli outbreak and there were people getting sick because, the kitchen wasn't clean at a local restaurant, I think people in our community would expect us to step in and do something about that. That's at a different scale for sure, but that's what public health is, and that's what public health has done during COVID. And so I think our role as city government is to listen very closely to our local public health officials and to do what we can. We can't do a whole lot necessarily in many situations, but to take the actions we can take to follow the public health advice that's being given to us.
Mark?
My turn? Okay, Can you read it one more time?
We as citizens have the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. By protecting our individual rights, how will you protect our right to life during COVID?
So, in my studies, I've found that the idea that the government has to protect your life, your liberty, your pursuit of happiness, that's a little bit different than what they meant. They really meant you have the right to securing your life, you have the right to securing your liberty, and you have the right to securing your pursuit of happiness, which was a play on words for property. So the government, this idea that the government gives that to you, that's a misnomer. Again, our government is our servants. They're not people over us dictating to us how to do things. So we have to secure these things for ourselves when possible. Now, he's right. If you have a major E. coli outbreak and you start finding clear evidence that it is rooted back to that and it's starting to damage people's properties and their lives, and there's a clear, tangible line, yes, you have an obligation to step in, right? Your job is to protect their liberty from their liberty, vice versa.
Okay. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, okay. That was basically my point. The idea is we need to make sure and get out of the way and allow them to secure their life, secure their own liberty, and secure their own happiness or their pursuit thereof, and allow them the best possible means to do so by getting out of their way.
Okay, well, I've kind of gone over here the time, but we're ready for closing statements. We'll start with you, Mark Trotter.
Okay. My name is Mark Trotter, as you've heard. Really, you know, I'd be honored to get the opportunity to serve you guys. The way I see it, I would be stepping into a position where I'm not to be served, and I don't know that anybody here feels that way, but I just want to make it clear. I'd be stepping into a position where I'm here to serve you, okay? I want to make sure that the city always empowers the individual to do what they need to do. That's my whole heart. That's my intent. The most grace-filled thing that I can afford you is the ability to make the right choices for you and your household, and really just kind of step out of your way. And as long as you're not getting on other people's property, messing up their things, you have free reign, right? That's my heart. It comes from a place of care and concern. Because I care about you, I want to protect what's yours. You have a literal property in your rights. So when they're taken away, that's theft. I don't want to be called a thief. I want to make sure that's not a factor or an issue here. So I'm going to step out of your way and allow you the space and the grace to do what you need to do for your family and your household. So if you elect me as mayor, that's what I'll do. I will approach things with transparency, clarity, and just a fresh, different perspective. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor.
Well, again, thank you to the League of Women Voters for having us here tonight and for making this a possibility to have this discussion. I think it's been a good one. I appreciate the discussion with Mark. I would say in my experience, again, up here for the last 6 years, that the thing I've learned the most is that this is not an easy job. It's a job where every day you've got to make decisions about complicated issues that affect lots of different people in lots of different ways. There are days when somebody steals a truck and drives it all over town trying to elude the police. There are days when the hospital is full. There are days when there's a huge water main break, or there's a sub-freezing temperatures for 2 weeks in a row, and we've got to figure out how to keep the water on. These are complicated issues, and not very few of them have easy answers. There are very few days that we do this job where you sit down and go, oh, clearly yes, this is the right answer. Right? It's a tough. There's a lot of tough decisions that need to be made, and I think it's important for us as a community to recognize that the role of City Council and the role of the mayor requires someone who is experienced in making those kinds of decisions. It requires someone who is open, available, will sit down and talk to you about every decision that needs to be made and the decisions that have been made. It requires someone who's going to take into account all facets of our society and our city, and someone who's not going to just focus on an ideal or a dogma or some sort of a pre-existing idea of the way things should be, but focus on what needs to happen in this city. This is a very pragmatic job, and it requires a pragmatic leader. I think I'm the right person to continue to do that here in Stillwater as the mayor, and I'll ask for your vote again on February 8th. Thank you.
Thank you both. Thank you to the citizens of Stillwater for your questions. And this will conclude this. And like I said, you can vote early next week, Thursday and Friday, the 3rd and 4th, from 8 to 6 p.m. at the election board. And also the election is February 8th. So I thank you all for your participation, and we'll see you at the polls. Be sure and vote.